Hello, everyone, and welcome to More Than Coincidence, Remembering Jesus Christ in Your Story. As the author and finisher of our faith, our Savior writes personal experiences into each of our lives, which can later strengthen, empower, and bring us peace upon reflection. This podcast is dedicated to sharing these anchoring memories from everyone's unique stories in order to collectively remember and testify of the reality of Jesus Christ and His presence in our lives. I'm your host, Lily, and I'm very excited to share these experiences together. Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight we have Andrea. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Will you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I'm Andrea. I am, a stay-at-home mom. I have 4 kids, super wonderful kids, all beautiful. My husband and I have been married for like 12 years. No. He's going to make fun of me. Almost 14 years. Like next month, it'll be 14 years.
Wow.
So
That's
it's,
awesome.
yeah. It's like, it feels like it's been forever, but also just a day. So,
Right.
yeah. And I don't know, like I guess a lot of my background I'm actually going to talk about, but, born and raised here in Utah. And so, yeah. I guess
Any
I should.
hobbies? Any
Yes.
fun hobbies?
I am okay. That I'm actually going to talk about it today a little bit.
We're just going to get to know all of you.
Yeah, really though. Like it's going to be all of it ties together. I guess I'm kind of boring, but like my husband makes fun of me because I have granny hobbies, and so one of them is family history. I will literally go for hours and just like it's funny. It has to do with my story, but yeah, that is my biggest hobby. And then I do gardening. I started that last year and it was so fun, and I loved being outside and anyway, so those are like my 2 things that I just love.
Awesome.
And yeah, so that's
when you said granny hobbies, I thought you were going to say crocheting, and I was like, me too. I love to crochet.
I wish my mom crochets, but I don't know. I'm not coordinated enough to do it. So
Hakuna Matata, it's tricky. I go through like phases where I'm like, I love to crochet, and it's usually around the holidays. I'm like, everybody's getting a crochet gift. And then I like kind of poop out at the end, and I'm like, okay, I can't crochet anymore. My wrist, I'm getting carpal tunnel. Like, I can't do this anymore.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. Like, it's so funny because I'm like, do your family history, and my husband's just like, you're such a grandma, and I'm like, it's not even like that much of a grandma hobby. What are you talking about?
Right, you're like, well, when I get to heaven, there's gonna be a lot more people happy to see me than you.
Yeah.
Because I did their work.
He's gonna die when he hears that because he's made that joke too. So. It's great. It's fine.
That's awesome.
But yeah, like it's funny because it's just like that ties in a lot with my story. So I guess like,
well, then let's just get to your story.
Yeah.
So Andrea, let me ask you the question then.
Yeah.
So what memories do you have in your life that you reflect on that remind you of our Savior Jesus Christ and anchor you to Him?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. And like, so.
Oh, and you asked me to do a trigger warning really quick. So I just want to give a trigger warning to anybody listening that we do mention sexual abuse. We're not going to, talk about it in detail, but it does play a part in the story. And so we just want to let anybody know in case you want to skip forward a little bit. But most of the story is not going to be that. So we want you to tune in.
Thankfully.
so keep listening. So sorry. I mean
no,
to go.
You're
so,
good.
So go ahead.
So yeah, so there's a lot of it's funny. A lot of these things like didn't have anything to do with each other until the last few months, actually, that I've been looking back and I see how connected they are. And it's so beautiful because it's just like, I don't know, like it's my story. Like this is just, it's crazy how connected it is. And so, so I guess I'll start. My parents are from Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that like is a huge core part of me is just my family and my heritage. Like I just like I'm gonna tell a story because my husband requested it. He loves this story and it's so cute because like I love this story, but like he was like, are you gonna talk about it? And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure.
Okay.
So but yeah, to give context, because I'm obviously Latina and then LDS too, and so there's like this huge focus on family, right? Like just family is everything.
From both directions.
From
You've got
both
it.
directions, yeah. So So I guess I'll start there. Obviously, this was before I was born, that my parents, like I'm going to talk about their love story, actually. My dad, his family, they found the church, let's see, when my dad was, I think, 12. I might be getting that wrong, but I think 12. And they're pioneers there.
Yeah.
Like they, like my grandparents, they were devout Catholics, and then all of a sudden they were introduced to the church and they just hit the ground running. It was beautiful, right? And so anyway, it was a few years into it. There was some ward drama, I guess I should say. Like there was someone that was kind of being inappropriate with my aunt.
Yeah.
And kind of proposed to her when she was 16.
Whoa.
I know. Like, this is going to be, again, since I'm Latina, this is going to be like a telenovela.
I was going to say.
So he was being inappropriate with her. And my grandpa, oh my gosh, I love talking about him. He is just the coolest person to me. He like was out in the jungles of Venezuela when he was in the military. Like
he's a rough guy.
He's a rough guy, okay? And so, and he had a temper. And so my aunt let him know about what was going on. And this person came over to the house to basically like try to talk to my grandpa about, whether that could happen or not. And my grandma opened the door. And she was just like, oh, you really, really got to go. You need to leave. And he was just like, no, like I'm here. I have like a serious inquiry to make. And, and she's like, we know, and you need to leave. And that's when my grandpa rounded the corner with the machete.
Yep.
So he got out of there really quick after that. Right.
Yeah.
And so, so that's like a little glimpse into my grandpa. He's a family man. He will, like defend his family. And so anyway, and this person kind of like had he was well known in the ward and like had, a position of power, I guess I should say. And so, so it kind of like tore people apart. Like they were just like, he would never do that. The Diaz family is just, full of it.
Right.
So it kind of like split people, and a lot of people did not like my grandpa after that. Fast forward a few more years, and President then Elder Hinckley, back then at this time, he came to Venezuela to visit, and it was because he was organizing a second stake. Venezuela was just one stake at that time, and so it was growing, and so he came down to,
to reorganize things.
And so with that, he needed a new patriarch in the stake. In this new stake, and so he showed up and he said, I think that Baltazar should be the patriarch, my grandpa. And that caused an uproar. It was pretty bad. And so Elder Hinckley was like, you know what, obviously we're not going to get anywhere in this conversation. Let's end the meeting here, and we'll talk tomorrow morning. And we know these details because of his assistant, actually. So his assistant, or Elder Hinckley, like pulled him over, and he was like, hey, just so you know, like, I want the Diaz family here tomorrow morning. So just make sure that they're here tomorrow morning. And so the next day, he this is the story that my husband wanted me to tell, by the way, because it's pretty crazy. But Elder Hinckley was just like, so we're gonna call the patriarch assistant. I don't know his name, sorry if you ever hear this, but I don't know your name. But his assistant came over to help, and he's like, can you pull a file out of this folder, like of this box, and whoever we pull,
is who it's going to be.
Is going to be the patriarch. And he's like, yeah, sure. So he pulls it without looking or anything, and it was my grandpa. And so it was so funny because he's just like, any questions? And
Yep.
of course the room was silent, right? Like,
Yeah. Seems fair enough to me.
right? Yeah. So it's great. So that's the fun story, I guess. He was sustained, right? He was called to be the patriarch. He served for many years.
Yeah.
And my dad has like some of the coolest stories about it. And anyway, that was actually the reason why my parents met. So my mom was in the other state, and for some reason, she just was not getting a hold of the patriarch. Like, they just kept on missing each other. And so it was just like, okay, well, maybe I can just go to the other patriarch. And so she called, and my dad was the one who was running things for him. He would take the phone calls and stuff. Yeah. And so that's when they first talked. And so he scheduled her patriarchal blessing, and my mom got her patriarchal blessing from my grandpa.
That's really special.
Yeah. And that actually, and I should kind of like back up too, just to explain my mom's side of the family too. So that's my dad's side of the family. My mom's side of the family, she met the missionaries when she was a little bit older, I think. Or no, I think my dad was 10 and my mom was 12. Maybe that's what, like, I was like, that doesn't sound exactly right. But anyway, I hope those are right. But yeah, younger. Yeah. So, so anyway, so she started taking the lessons with a few of her siblings. And she got baptized. And my grandparents didn't, though. But they didn't have any like hard feelings or anything. Like, they weren't against the church, and they allowed them to get baptized and everything. But they didn't feel like they should get baptized for whatever reason. And so, and my mom or my grandma, she was a character, and she's like, oh, I love the missionaries. I love the church. I cannot give up my coffee right now. Like, she's, like, she's a Venezuelan woman. Like, they drink a lot of coffee. And so anyway, so she was like, so, like, baptize me when I'm dead, like, that was the joke. And so she told my mom that several times. And so anyway, so I had like this spiritual giant on my dad's side. And then I also think that my grandma was this spiritual giant, but we, like, she obviously didn't get baptized. Right. And so,
but you can still have a relationship with God. And
exactly. She still had that connection, and but it was just not her time to get baptized. So, it's fine. But so fast, back forward to my mom. She got her patriarchal blessing, and it was beautiful. And then, of course, I think it was a few years later. I can't remember the exact timeline, but my parents got married. Yeah. She had a really close relationship with my grandpa, and my dad did too. He was the youngest boy, and so they were just really tight. And so I grew up hearing about, this amazing man. And what happened was, after they got married and after my older brother was born, I have one aunt that lives here in the United States. And she was like, you should come here. You should go to BYU. You should, Right. So my dad was like, okay, we're making the move, right? Yeah. So he moved up here to the States, and my mom stayed back for a little bit. But anyway, he moved up here, started going to school, and then my mom came, and she was pregnant with me. Very pregnant with me. I feel so bad. I'm like, flying that pregnant. That's crazy. But yeah, so they came over to the States, and the plan was always to return back to Venezuela. But we'll talk about it later, but things just didn't work out. And so it was a long distance relationship for the family, right? Right. That was back in 1990 that they moved here. And so a few years later, my grandpa actually passed away. He, it was 96. So I never really got to meet him. Yeah. It was it's just one of those things where it was like, it was difficult because I didn't understand what was going on. And then there were other circumstances because my dad wasn't a citizen. He was here on a student visa. Right. He wasn't supposed to go back, but he went back because of, obviously, you know, like he had to go to his dad's funeral. And so, and it was very unexpected. And so anyway, so he went he was gone for 2 months, and I was just like, what is going on? You know, at 6 years old. And
that's hard.
So it was hard, but like, he was able to come back. And then a few years after that, you know, like to get into a little bit of history and politics, the president, Chavez, he was elected, right?
Right.
And he was the one who was promising a lot of things. And my dad was just like, I don't feel right about this guy. And my mom too. She was actually like very, you know, like, I don't like where this is going. And so my parents unknowingly kind of like, my dad got to see my grandma one more time too, because of the funeral. And like, she actually lived with us for a little bit too.
Right.
But that's a whole other story. And I don't remember it because I was like 2 and 3 years old.
Yeah.
So I never met my grandma on, you know, like on my mom's side. And my dad's side, it was, you know, she was very young.
Right.
Growing up. And then I never met either of my grandpas either. My father's dad passed in 96. My other grandpa, he's still around, but he's got severe dementia.
Right.
And so because of the political situation, it's just really hard. And we don't want him traveling either. So it's really hard. But anyway, so it was back then, they didn't realize that this was, you know, like one of the last times that they were going to see their parents.
Yep.
And so it was 98, and my dad was just like, you know what, we're going to stay and we're going to make it work here. Right.
In Utah.
Yeah. And so, and again, I was born and raised here. And so I grew up without my extended family. You know, I only had that one aunt, which not that she isn't great and wonderful. It's actually her birthday. So if she hears
happy
this,
birthday.
Shout out to my aunt. Happy birthday. But she, you know, it was her husband and her son at the time.
Right.
And so, but I had this entire family in Venezuela that I didn't get to know,
right.
You know?
Well, and that's big. Family's huge. I'm sure that your parents were both feeling that heartache of not being with their family.
Oh, yeah. And I remember when I was younger, it was so, you know, like this was, again, like late 90s. It was hard to call long distance. And that's the thing. All growing up, there was always something. There was something that was making it hard to communicate with family. And now we have social media, right?
Yeah.
But it was still like my grandma didn't know how to use
it.
social media, right?
Right.
So it was always really hard to communicate with family. So I grew up not knowing my extended family. Yeah. And both my parents had big families, like several siblings. And so I grew up in a different culture than, you know, like, because there's the Venezuelan culture and then the Utah culture. And, you know, like, even though I was raised in Utah, I was still raised by Venezuelan culture. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it was just like, so it was kind of weird. And I never felt like I really fit in anywhere. Yeah. And so anyway, so it was hard because family was everything to me, even when I was small. Like, I remember in the 4th grade, I was sitting there after winter break, and the teacher was just asking, like, what did everyone do? And all of my classmates are like, oh, went to grandma's house, went and saw my cousins. And I was just sitting there like devastated because it's like, I never get to see my grandma, you know, like I never get to see my cousins. Right. They're so out of reach for me. Right. Yep. So it was a major heartache for me growing up. Yeah. And it was it was difficult. And so you know, to get on to like the next part of the story, that's kind of like the context, the background of, you know, like family is everything. My culture, you know, my heritage, my culture, my church, all of those things come together, and family is just everything, right? And I didn't get to grow up with my family. Yeah. Or not a lot, or maybe I should say in a way that I wanted, like in a way I envisioned, right? Right. However, with that being said, I grew up hearing stories constantly, just constantly. Again, about my grandpa, my grandma too. I don't want to leave her out. I haven't talked about her very much, but like his wife, grew up with stories. And so
you felt like you knew them,
but
you didn't like know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a relationship with my grandpa.
Yeah.
Even though he had already passed away.
Right.
So it was like, so there was that. And then I knew, the stories of my grandmas and I loved them. Like, oh my gosh, my mom's mom was hilarious and just had all of these, like, she cussed like a sailor. She had like all of these characteristics that just made her so funny, you know? And so anyway, she's like this tiny woman and just
a fiery Latina. Like
just fiery. Like she would put you in your place, right? So
sounds about right.
But she was also like so giving and so loving. And one of my favorite stories about her is actually before my parents got married. She talked to my mom. She was just like, so you're gonna get married? And she's just like, yeah. And it was, they had a short engagement, but she was like, or no, this wasn't even before, or this was before the engagement, but she was just like, you know what? If you make it to marriage, now that you're Mormon, right? Because back then it was fine. Now that you're Mormon, that means that you guys shouldn't be doing anything before marriage. And she's like, yeah, that's right. And she's like, okay, if you make it to marriage and you are able to make it to the temple, because, that was, they didn't have a temple close to them, but that was the goal.
The goal,
She's like, I will quit smoking. And this woman had smoked a pack a day. Like a lot.
Wow.
Since she was 13 years old, like young.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so that's a big promise, right? Yeah. And my mom, she was like, yeah, like I made it to marriage, so you got to quit smoking. And she was like, done. Cold turkey, never smoked again, right? So like she was just this, like, there are so many stories about this woman that I'm just like, she's so endearing. And so anyway, so there's just like all of these
I now know your grandma and your grandpa.
So it's like, it's funny because I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, even though like I didn't know them, I had a relationship with them. Yeah. So that's the context, that's the background. And then to move on, this is where it, kind of gets dicey, my teenage years. Yeah. So, we got along with this family. They were also Venezuelan. My dad knew them back in Venezuela, and they moved here to Utah as well. And so we were really close. Like his best friend was one of the brothers in this family. Yeah. And we hung out with that family all the time, and they became a sort of extended family for me. They weren't, blood family, but like I just adored them as much as I would a family. Right. Like blood family. And so we were doing everything together. Christmas, New Year's. For Venezuelans, we do like huge New Year's parties. And so like every year dancing with this family, really close to this family. I saw, all of the cousins, right? Or, like all of the kids in this family, like cousins. And so, anyway, when I was 13, though, the brother, the oldest brother, he molested me. And it was, this was actually the second time in my life that had happened. Right. And, but this one, I was 13 and I was very, cognizant of what was happening, right, especially with my history. Right. And so, we'll call back the story of my grandpa, and the machete. Yeah. My dad is a lot like my grandpa. And so because I had already gone through it, right, I was just like, you know what? This is going to destroy so much if I talk about this. So I'm just going to keep it to myself. My family's going to be gone. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it was rough because it was just like I had this entire family that, or, like second family, and I didn't have my other family. Right. And so, and
you didn't want to be the one to like break it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was just, and I knew it would break. Right. I knew it would break. And so I, it's funny because I was 13. Like this was, I grew up really quick, unfortunately. And so one of the things, that kind of like kept me afloat, I guess. Because I numbed it out. But I was just like, I need to, I know I can't live with this by myself, right? Like this is pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm.
However, like I can't break my family up. So what can I do? And I just, I was just like, like I've been taught forgiveness, like you have to forgive people and it'll bring me peace, right? Like that's what I've always been told. And so I prayed my little heart out constantly to be able to move past this. Fast forward a few years, I'm 15. I'm about to start dating. I'm, I'm on the verge of turning 16. And
Quinceañeras.
Yes. Yes, exactly. I had one of those. And the boy I really liked was there, my first boyfriend. And so that actually was the catalyst of, holy crap, like, I am going to have to learn how to be connected to someone when I've been keeping people at arm's length, right? And I couldn't verbalize this back then, but that's basically what it was. And so I started having just so much anxiety and leading up to, because I knew as soon as I turned 16, I was going to date this boy, right? Like we were just waiting until then.
Yeah.
And so, so I got it. I can't even remember what it was about, but I got into this huge argument with my parents one night, and I just screamed like, "You have no idea what I've been through." And I guess my mom was just so intuitive, and she was just like, "What happened to you?" Like straight face, dead cold. She was like, "What happened to you?" And I was just like, "Oh, nothing." Like, like, "Oh, no, gotta walk it back, gotta walk this back." And she was like, "No, what happened?" And I was just like, like trying to make excuses for what I said. And, like, "I'm just a dumb teenager. You don't listen to me."
Right.
And she looked at me and she
knew.
was just like, "Was it this person?"
Yeah.
And at this point, my dad's just sitting there quietly. Right.
Yeah.
And that's when I broke down and I started crying and I was like, yeah. And explained what happened.
Yeah.
Well, not even everything. I just explained that something happened. And my dad just quietly stood up.
To find the machete.
Yeah, it was 1:00 in the morning at this point, I think, because we had just been arguing for so long. And so he just like got up and I saw him walk into his closet and he was getting dressed, to go kill this man. And I just screamed at him and I was just like, "This is why I didn't tell you, because I knew you were going to go to jail. My family was going to be broken up and then I would lose everyone." Right.
Right.
And that calmed him down and he was just like, sat down and he was just like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Like, "Okay, hear you loud and clear." This was, like right before I was 16 and my parents were phenomenal. They were like, "What do you need? What should we do?" Right. And so we went and reported the guy and started the prosecution and everything. And we didn't know this at the time because I kind of like started distancing myself from him too. But I couldn't let them know. Right. So it was just like
this awkward thing where you still see him, but you don't want to be around him.
Exactly. And I think that they caught on to it because we saw him less over the years.
Yeah.
But he was actually diagnosed with some disease. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was just, like it was pretty severe. It was serious. And so we started going to court and it was dragged out for an entire year.
Yep.
Every single month I would have to go and I would have to sit there and face him. Right.
Yep.
And it was exhausting because there was so much turmoil in my family about this too. And so again, like it was just like, oh my gosh, my family is having issues because of this. And I blamed myself for a lot of it.
Yep.
And so, it's funny because my mom was so clear, like, and now being a mother, I'm just like,
It makes sense now.
She was so clear. She was just like, you did not do anything to deserve this. Do not put this on yourself. She was constantly telling me that.
And as every victim, like, that's really cool because every victim needs to know that.
Yes.
Like, it is not your fault.
They were so, like, my parents were stellar during this. But it was still really hard. And my mom had a really hard time with it. And she had issues that she was facing, mental health issues and stuff like that. And so lots of stuff just happened all throughout this time, and it was just all compact, and it was high school, and you know, like, high school is already a hard enough time. And so I just lost hope. Like, I just you know, like, I just lost hope of things working out. It was just, I was just trying to get through the week. It was just such a difficult time.
You were just ready for the end to be there. Like, can this just be over?
I didn't even make, like, it's hard to even admit because it's one of, like, my major insecurities, but I didn't graduate high school because I was just not present in high school. I was constantly just at home trying to just survive, right? Yeah. And so
which is okay, by the way.
Thanks. I know, it's like, it's one of those things where
honestly, that's okay.
I've come to accept, because it's not like I was, you know, like, a bad student or anything. I immediately went over and got my, you know, like, my diploma afterwards.
Right.
But it was just, I had no idea what life had for me. Right. And so I just had, like, this hopelessness. Yeah. And, so finally they, you know, prosecuted him. And, the crazy thing was, so he went to jail, or prison, and he served his term there, but then he was deported because he wasn't here legally. Right. And so he was sent back to Venezuela. Now, you know, we can fast forward a little bit, and I can kind of shift gears. But my husband, like, this is our story now, and this is probably one of the things, like, it's so funny because I'm like, this is so long, but I promise it all, you know, comes together. It all comes together. So I met my husband right out of high school, and I was one of those young women that I was like, I'm gonna date for at least a year before I commit to anything. I'm not gonna be one of those girls.
That was
right?
me too.
Yeah. So I was just like, nope, like, gotta make sure that I date someone for long enough, and I'm gonna wait until I'm 21, because, you know, like, that was the only thing. Like, I was just like, I just want to have some time to just.
And honestly, you deserve that. Let's just be real. You need
high
a break.
School, yeah, you know. So it was just like, I just did not want to, like, obviously I liked boys, but, you know, and I wanted to, like, date around, but I didn't want to do anything serious. Yeah, you know. And so it was just funny because then I go hang out with my friends and we go to a hot tub, and then there's this guy,
really cute
that's just super cute, has the most beautiful eyes, and anyway, so we just started talking, and it was so funny because we were like, he was kind of following me around for the night, and, like, I would follow him back, and, you know, but, like, we were kind of talking the entire night, but there was one point that I was just like, I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you from? Like, and he's just like, I don't know. Like, and he's like, I mean, you seem familiar, but I don't know who you are. Like, I don't think. So I interrogated this poor boy for 20 minutes. And I was just like, are you sure? Like, my dad worked, you know, like, at this building that was adjacent to the building that you worked at. Maybe, like,
maybe
anyway,
I saw you randomly.
Maybe there was something, but I could not connect it. And I was just like, that was just so weird. But then, we started dating, and, you know, time went by. Now, this comes to my patriarchal blessing. Again, I had a really tough time when I was a teenager, and so I wasn't even thinking about that. Right. And when my husband and I were dating, I was like, I should go get that. You know, like, I should go get that because things are kind of getting serious. And, you know, patriarchal blessings are always like, they always mention husbands, you know, like, anyway, from my limited knowledge of patriarchal blessings. Yeah. And so, anyway, so I scheduled my patriarchal blessing. And, and I should add, My mom, actually, so she had her patriarchal blessing by my grandpa, right? And she read it to us, and it was beautiful, and it was tailored perfectly to her. And anyway, it it got lost. We don't know what happened. She lost her copy, and then when she wrote, headquarters, they're like, we
can't find it.
We can't find it, which was devastating for my mom.
I would be crying my eyes out.
Yeah, especially, because my grandpa had passed.
Keeping her connected to her family.
Yeah, so it was just like, it was so bad. So so she was like, oh my gosh, I had such a good relationship with him, and I had all of these like beautiful things that even before like
he knew her,
that he told me. And anyway, so I grew up with, first of all, my crazy amazing grandpa, and he's a patriarch, which is just so cool in and of itself, right? So I just like, when I made that appointment, I was just like, oh, I kind of had like this dread, and I was just like, what if I don't have an amazing patriarchal blessing, right? And I had scheduled my mom, they actually okayed it for my mom to get a second one. Cool. And so we went and got our patriarchal blessings the same day. Now, this was on my birthday when I turned 19. Also the day after I got engaged.
A little late for the guidance ahead of time, but
Yeah, and so I was just like, okay, well, I just need some kind of confirmation. Yeah. I need to know that it's going to be for me. Like I need it to be personalized. Yeah. And obviously it comes from Heavenly Father, but I was just like, how is this patriarch that's never met me before gonna know? And so anyway, so it was an incredible experience. My mom went first. Oh my gosh, hers was beautiful. And she was bawling her eyes out. And afterwards she was like, those were your grandpa's words. Like the phrases that he used were your grandpa's words. And it was different, like it was a different blessing, but it was like he was there. Yeah. He was there in the room. And and so I obviously I didn't hear this at this point, and it was my turn, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. What if, I was just praying, and I'm like, please let this be, personalized for me, that I know that I'm being spoken to. Right. And the first thing that the patriarch talks about is that I have a gift. And I was just like, my ears perked up, and I'm like, what? I'm not gifted. But I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it was, you had so many friends in the premortal existence, and sorry,
you're good.
And you will recognize them in this life, and you promised that you would do everything you could to help them get back to Heavenly Father, and they made that same promise to you, and you will recognize them on this side of the veil. Yeah. And I was just like, what? How could he have known that? And so I opened my eyes, and that was the first time I saw my husband crying. He was my fiance at that point, right? But he was just bawling like a baby. It was adorable. And so anyway, so it was just like, it was this beautiful and immediate confirmation that it wasn't about my grandpa, right? Like as much as I love him, and as much as it would have been special to have something from him, right? It was about my Heavenly Father. And so that's the moment in life where I learned that I could rely on my patriarchal blessing. Yeah. It was amazing. And so, again, we'll fast forward. That was, like, my patriarchal blessing means so much to me. It's just crazy. I read it all the time. And, so a few years go by, and it's the Payson Temple open house. And we went, it was my husband and I think my mother-in-law. I know my mother-in-law was there, and I think my sister-in-law and her family, but we were all there, and we were outside waiting to go into the temple. And I was just looking around at the grounds, and I saw a familiar face, and it was one of the family members of the guy who had abused me, his wife. And I was just like, oh, like kind of shocked to see her
Right.
there because I wasn't expecting
Right.
to see her. And then I saw her kids one by one. I recognized all the kids and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're all here. And again, her husband had been deported.
Yeah.
So I wasn't expecting to see him.
Yeah.
But I did. And it was at the temple of all places, right?
Right.
And so it kind of hit me like a brick wall when I saw him. I just, kind of like, I actually audibly kind of like gasped.
Yeah.
And my husband just like turned to me and he's just like, you okay? And I'm like, that's him, like I pointed over to him and
Yeah.
he knew immediately. And he was just like, do you want me to go say something? Like, what do you need? Right.
Yeah.
Like immediately jumped in. And I was so grateful, but I was shocked because my prayers had been answered.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment that I realized, I was just like, oh my gosh, I've forgiven this man. Like
Yeah.
I had nothing in my heart, but, like almost, love, but not, people are like, what? When they hear my,
but forgiveness, like true
it
forgiveness.
was, it was just like, you know what? Like you did something horrible, but I don't hold it against you. And
Yeah.
I have let go of that.
Right.
It has no power over me.
Right.
And it was so incredible because it was at the temple that I got this confirmation that that I had forgiven someone who had done something so terrible to me.
Right.
And so, so to kind of tie it in, at this point, I've learned I can rely on my patriarchal blessing. I can rely on, like these promptings when I get, or when I go to the temple. So, so those are, like kind of the messages of these things that had happened while I was growing up. So fast forward now, to 2022. Yeah, 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I had kind of given up hope of like ever meeting the majority of my extended family. I have one cousin that's come to live here, and she lives up by my aunt. And so I've gotten to see her. But again, like it's just like, oh, I wish I could see all of my family. Right. Yeah. And especially my grandma, because.
And this is your grandma on your mom's side or your dad's side?
My mom's side.
Your mom's side.
So
the feisty one.
The feisty one. Exactly.
Got it.
I mean, they were both feisty, but like this one is a little bit more
cold
feisty.
turkey. Quit smoking.
Yes. And so my dad's mom had passed away in 2012. Okay. And so at this point I've lost my dad's parents, right? Yeah. And I didn't really get to experience them here in this life. Right. I haven't met most of my family. Right. And in 2022, there was some legislation that was approved because a lot of the people that are crossing the border right now are Venezuelan. Yep. And so in order to kind of like curb that, they made it so that you could sponsor your family or petition for your family to come over way easier for Venezuelans. Right. And so when this happened, my mom was like, oh my gosh, we might have a chance to actually bring your grandma over. Right. At this point, my grandma has been eating just, what they can get. I know. For years. Right. And she had been, like there was a definite case for persecution, like a political persecution. Right. She had gotten beaten up outside of her home. Yep. And again, she was a grandma. Yeah, Venezuela is not a safe place. It is not a safe place. I've never been back because of that. Like my dad actually specifically was like, you are not allowed to go back. And, we're Latin. So we still listen to our parents when we're adults. Like that is, you're not allowed to go to Venezuela. Okay.
See puppy.
Yes, exactly. So I've never been back to meet my family. And, I'm friends with them on social media. But again, my grandma wasn't on social media.
Right. It's not the same.
Yeah. So, but around the same time, one of my mom's best friends from childhood got a phone. She was able to get a phone, and so she had access to social media. She had Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
Because of that, my mom was able to talk to my Nona. Oh, sorry. I call her Nona. She's my grandma. So Nona is my mom's mom. Yeah. She was able to talk to her mom all the time, my Nona all the time. And one time I finally got to talk to her. Like this was the first time in over a decade that I was able to talk to my Nona. And it was amazing. Like it was just, oh my gosh. And she's so funny. She is so sweet and so funny. And so, so when this legislation went through, my mom was like, "Might have a chance, right?" And because of everything that had happened when I was a teenager, and like just life in general, I developed this narrative that things just don't work out. So when my mom said that, I actually immediately went to my husband, and I was just like, "If this doesn't work out, like I don't want to hope. I don't want to hope."
Right.
Right. But, you know, like, how do you not hope? And so, so my parents started the paperwork, and at that point, I let it creep in. And it was my mom and I, my mom lives with me right now. My parents do. And we were, you know, like that Christmas, I just turned to my mom, and I was just like, next year, this is going to be different, you know, like
just getting so excited.
So excited. So excited. And, we were planning like the Disney trip that we were going to take her on, and
she will know America.
Right. Yeah. I was just like, you know, she has had such a tough time in Venezuela that I was like, I just want her twilight years to just be joy, like pure joy, where she can just exactly
fun, laughter.
Exactly. And so we were making plans, and then, I don't know if you've ever gone through a sponsorship process and stuff. It takes a while.
It does.
And it's a pain in the butt. And anyway, so we had just gotten everything in, and we were waiting. Yeah. And we had heard from another Venezuelan that things were happening for them, and they had gotten everything approved.
So you're hoping that you're in the pipeline to get approved.
So we were like, oh my gosh, we're weeks away from this.
Yeah. Waiting by your phone or by your email, like refreshing it every hour.
Just constantly. And, you know, I was just like, I was prepping my kids to meet their great grandma, right? Yeah. And then February hit, and she caught COVID. And again, she was a smoker for decades, right? Yep. And so I spiraled so hard. And I was just like, I know this isn't going to work out. And I was so angry, because I was just like, keep in mind, the last time my mom saw her mom was 32 years before, at the airport, giving her a hug, saying bye to her.
Yep.
And so
this was a big deal for you and for her.
It was a big deal. And like, I kind of tried to, because I didn't have a relationship with my grandma, right? Like, I had talked to her once, and I just rationalized, and I was just like, how is this happening, right? Yeah. And so it was funny, because I was like, what am I doing? Okay, I'm gonna go pray. And I am feisty, just like my Nona.
Yep.
So I went and I prayed, but it was not not a good prayer. It was not a prayer. It was accusation and anger. And I was just, Heavenly Father, why would you do this? Not to me, to my mom. Like, why would you give us hope and then just take her, you know? And keep in mind, she's sick. She hasn't died, but I am just, I know what's coming. I am, you know, in the depth of sorrow and despair. And I just, you know, I was just like, you are cruel. Like, why would you do this? And so anyway, I, you know, huffed, and I ended my prayer, and like, for a bit, like, this was over hours, I just ran to my room, closed the door, locked it, and didn't let anyone in, and just cried and all of this. And this went on for a while, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm getting at. This went on for a while. And finally, I was just so exhausted, and I was just like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel worse. I feel angrier.
Yeah.
I am just, I don't know what to do. I can't live with this, right? Like, this is too much to bear.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I just had the thought, like, like, Andrea, you know you can trust him. You know. You've had this happen, a soul-crushing experience, and you gave it to him.
Yes.
You know, right? And so it was just like, oh, duh. So I get back on my knees, and I was just like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to do this. But thy will be done, you know, you know, very snotty, but thy will be done.
Yep.
Just give me what I need to get through this, because I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I don't know how I'm going to.
I literally have no hope right now.
I don't. Right. And again, I'm very feisty. So anger is usually what I jump to. Right.
Me too.
And I did. Right.
Yeah.
But this overwhelming peace, just otherworldly, came over me, and it was just, you know, like, I know, I'm gonna take this, I know. And so after that, it was just, you know, like, okay, 1 hour at a time. And she was in and out. She, you know, like, she was actually discharged from the hospital for a minute, but I knew. And so she went back because she had pneumonia. Yep. And so that's actually what ended up taking her. And it was traumatic too, because in Venezuela, the healthcare system is so bad. My family couldn't get in to see her. They weren't allowing her family to see her because she had COVID. Right. And she could be contagious. And so she passed, and she was alone in the hospital. And it was just, it was a terrible experience. And the way they treated, you know, her body and the burial and stuff, it was inhumane. And thinking about it, like, I talked to my friends about it, and they were just like, how terrible. Like, they were angry. And I was just like, I'm angry, but like, not as much as I would normally be.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I was aware that this piece was still
lingering.
At play and lingering.
Yeah.
And so, so she passed, and I just spent the day with my mom, and, you know, was just like, I am a doer, you know, I have to stay busy. So I was just like, Mom, when she was younger, she told you that she wasn't getting baptized until she died.
Guess what?
So, why don't we, this was in the end of February.
Yeah. Of 2022.
This was 2023. Yeah.
Okay, so
2022 is when we heard about, you know, the legislation and stuff.
Okay.
And so
it's been a whole year.
So yeah, a little bit less, but, you know, but I was just like, her birthday is in May. Why don't we do, you know, like, some family history? Oh, I should mention, sorry, backing up, my patriarchal blessing. So that was the first thing, that story. The rest of it was so much about family history. So much. And I had not really done family history at this point. Like, I had dabbled in it, but, and it even said, work with your mother on this. And again, we got our patriarchal blessings the same day, right? Yeah. And so, so anyway, so I had not actually dived into it.
Right.
And then I was just like, you know what? My patriarchal blessing says to do family history. It says that there is a long line of ancestors that are waiting.
Right.
So let's do it.
Let's do it. Yep.
So I told my mom, we're going to do family history. We're going to set a baptism date at the temple for grandma, and we're going to make it a party. Okay. We're going to make we're going to make it a party. And so, so we made a party. We went on May 27th.
Wow.
To the temple, and the majority of my family was there, and we did a few baptisms for a whole bunch of family members.
Yeah.
Now, Again, I had not dabbled. And one of the main reasons was because there were so many brick walls in my family history. So many.
Right.
So.
Well, it's not like you can just go access the records.
No. Every time that there's drama in Latin America, they burn the records. And so it's like, so it's just like, this is impossible. This is an impossible task, right? And
I love that.
It was just so hard. Like, I watched my mom doing family history growing up, but like, it was brick wall after brick wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and this is one of those other duh moments, okay? My Nona passed, and I started working on family history. All of these brick walls.
Just lifted.
I have literally over 2,000 names in just the last year of people that I found.
Really?
The majority of them are on her side, specifically.
She's like in heaven, like, okay, you're right here. Okay, you're right here.
And it was so crazy. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is not a coincidence. More than a coincidence, right? And so all of these names, like I would think of a last name like that I was just working on, and then there would be new hints. I could not keep up with the hints.
Oh my gosh.
And anyway, so like all the record hints and stuff. And so anyway, so since then I've gotten 2,000 names. Like on mostly her side, and I'm still going. Like, it's crazy how many sources I got. Like 16,000 sources almost last year, just from the end of February to December.
And is this because people have been indexing and stuff out there, or where are these coming from?
So there's tons of indexing going on in Venezuela and Colombia, because she's from both, and so so just all of these indexing opportunities, and like, and not only that, but I do crazy. I just go full crazy when I'm doing it, and I will look for every variation of spelling. I go through the records. Like, I am gonna find at least.
You're probably a master
source
at reading handwriting.
Oh my gosh, I try to be. My mom is way better. But yeah, it's really hard because it's also in Spanish, and like, although I speak Spanish, it's not my forte. And so it's hard. Yeah. And so, so I see all of these miracles. And not only that, but at the temple, we were in the celestial room, my entire family. And it was just, you were supposed to be here today. You were supposed to find these names. These names have been waiting. Right. And so like that just rested on me. And it was just so peaceful. And it was just like, you know what? I didn't realize this before. Right. But what I wanted the most was a relationship with my Nona. Yeah. And when I prayed, I asked for what I needed to survive this. Yeah. And looking back, I was just like, oh my gosh, I have my relationship with my Nona, even though I can't see her, I can't talk to her. Right. I can feel her, and she is constantly there helping me. Yep. It's incredible. And so anyway, so all of these like little miracles have happened in the temple. Right. Well, sorry, do you mind if I just...
Oh yeah, of course, just, like, came into my head. I just think it's cool because when you were telling the story in the beginning, you specifically mentioned how she felt like it wasn't time to get baptized. Like, what? Like, seeing this now, like none of this would have happened. Exactly. Like, had she been baptized, none of this would have happened.
Exactly. And so it was just
that's blowing my mind.
This was all
planned.
Like, it was all the Lord's timing. And it's just so funny because I look back with 2020 vision, right? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I lost total hope, but it's like, this is so much better. Yeah. You know, I could have taken my Nona to Disneyland, and it would have been great. You know, like I would have loved to have that time with her, but like I knew that I had a relationship with my dad's dad, right? Even though he had passed. Right. And I didn't even see that as an option. And it's like, I feel just as close to my Nona as I do with my dad's dad, which is pretty dang close. Like you know, and so, all of these things have happened. Every time that I go to the temple, I take family names. Like, I have not been to the temple without a family name. And every single time there is something. There is something that I needed to hear. Wow. There's a feeling. There's a confirmation that I'm doing the right thing every time. And it's just, It's crazy. And so anyway, so that is my story, is all of these things, all of these coincidences, right?
Right.
Happen. And I was able to learn how to hear and hear from him, hear from my Heavenly Father. And again, they were more than coincidences. Looking back, it's just like, this was perfectly
aligned,
perfectly written, because he's the author of our lives, right?
Yeah,
it was perfectly written.
Yeah, best telenovela ever.
Right? It's mine. It's
telenovela.
So yeah,
that's so beautiful. Well, wow, I wish I had follow-up questions, but I feel like you were so thorough. Like, that was just it is incredible. And I think, yeah, just seeing everything when you reflect back of just how your family played such a big role, even these horrible things that happened to you in your life ended up playing a big role with your patriarchal blessing, influencing all of that, being able to reflect back onto that. And I love how you refer back to your patriarchal blessing, because I feel like that's something that I need to be better at, because I feel like I read it and I'm like, okay, I get it. Read the scriptures. Okay, I get it. Choose the right. But there is power.
Yeah.
Like, there truly is power. And maybe that's something that I'm missing. And I need to go back and I need to try and really say, okay, how can this is God's literal direction for me.
Yeah.
Like, how can I take this more personally, just like you have? I think it's incredible.
Thanks. Yeah, it was. And I should mention, like, I specifically, when my Nona died, I was like, okay, we're going to do, what can I do? I can pray. I can do family history.
Yeah.
I read my patriarchal blessing, and it was like, and that's when I realized, because I hadn't really noticed it before, the line where it said, you have ancestors waiting on the other side for you.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that hit me so hard in that moment. And I was just like, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is why this happened, like, this is why it happened the way it did anyway.
Right.
And so yeah, it was just, I have a huge, huge testimony about patriarchal blessings and how you can you hear personalized messages for you at any given time in your life. You can just go look at it. And not only that, but when you go to the temple, you are putting yourself in a situation where you can actually hear from Heavenly Father too, and get these, not that you can't outside, but just especially at the temple. And so all of these things, I guess, prepped me for where to look when I needed a reminder of where to look, Right. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And are there any other final thoughts that you have, or any other things floating around? Any advice you would give to people who are wanting to start family history? Because I feel like people think it's an old lady thing, or people think it's like really hard. Like, I do think that we put these barriers in our brains, but we've clearly been told that we need to do it. So, and we have family search centers everywhere. Yeah. So what would you say for someone to get started?
Just do it. Like, just do it. It's so simple.
Well, okay.
The advice is so simple. Just do it. Because I had such a hard time with family search. I did not like it. Okay. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a breeze. It's fine.
Family search, you could do this better, actually.
I'm gonna help them, but
this would really help.
Honestly, like, it is just set a time to do it, and go and do it. And it will bring you, like, and it's kind of funny because I talked about specifically my Nona and my grandpa and how I have close relationships with them, even though I didn't get to meet them in this life. Yeah. I feel like I have so many relationships that I've never met them, but I know them. Yep. Right. And it's just, it's so helpful. Like, cool. It's so amazing knowing that you have so many people rooting for you on the other side, you know? So, yeah, my advice is just do it. Okay. Read your patriarchal blessing and just do your family history. So,
dang, enough said. I feel like I need to get better at that.
I am totally willing to help.
That's awesome. Okay, well, would you mind then just leaving us with a testimony?
Yeah, I have such a testimony that Heavenly Father is super aware of us at every single moment, that especially in the moments that we don't feel like He's aware of us. He is so aware, and He loves us so much, and He has given us so much to be able to hear from Him. Like, He wants us to be able to hear him. And so, yeah, my testimony is just he knows you, he loves you, and he is the author of your life. He is putting things in place for you. Right. You just got to be able to not be as stubborn as I was and, look for it, seek it. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Andrea, for your time tonight. And I really appreciate it. You're the best.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning into More Than Coincidence, Remembering Jesus Christ in Your Story. Please follow us on social media or share us with a friend. If you have an experience you'd like to share, feel free to reach out to morethancoincidence.rememberhim@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear all of the amazing memories you all have of our Savior. See you next time.